Thank you for coming to my talk today. This did not share yet. This is not up yet. Okay. Because I believe in credit and alt text and things, if you follow either that QR code or the URL I've shared on my LinkedIn, the slides with alt text and links, LinkedIn turns out to be not accessible, so check in the comments for the Google. For the Google slides, that's there because the LinkedIn slides are not accessible whatsoever. So thank you for that. And thank you for the organizers for choosing this talk. I don't know if anyone knows, but the tech industry kind of officially gives 0 fucks about DEI this year in 2023. And I think it's so important, specifically in open source. I have on the slides on LinkedIn, I thought open source was about 70% of people's code. It sounds more like it's 90%. So if we're not involving people in the development and building of open source communities that are going to be using and benefiting from it, we're fucking our future. So just statistics to start, the tech industry sucks for diversity. Open source is distinctly worse. The statistics I will quote throughout, or a lot of the advice and research, is typically on the binary or geography via GitHub. I'm sorry for that. That is the truth. Probably open source is more around 4% women and non-binary, not 14%. And then when we're talking about people that can really benefit from free and open software, Africa is a continent of about 18% of the global population that could really benefit. And they're not involved in the creation of that, if only 3% of open source is from Africa. But when you're looking at, statistics and all, it's better to look around. KubeCon last year was in Detroit. That's 75% black. How white was that event? Oh my God. That is a city with 75% black people. Look around here. Granted, it's UK, it's not London, but the statistic for London is that London is 40% people of color. So look around. I know it's like 50% women. I didn't look up that statistic. I'm just assuming. So as much as I know the organizers have worked hard on it, have people been given the time off to come to this event? And that's because, sorry, it's gone too far, my slides. Part of that is because people do not feel welcome in the community. The further you are from the white male majority in tech, the least likely you are to feel welcome. Belonging is feeling welcome somewhere. But I just want to remind those in the room that are not being counted in these statistics, you still count. I'm sorry. Please, people, publish the statistics for your open source communities. And when it comes down to it, as Angie, aka WebChick, says, women in open source are the canary in the coal mine. They often show other problems in diversity. So these statistics are still really valid and interesting. Chaos Project, Community Health Analytics in Open Source Software. This is a wonderful project out of CNCF that helps you measure things. Anything you want in the health of your community. Use their templates. How many people here are part of an open source community that needs more volunteers? Okay, about half. I'm surprised. What are you doing here then? Thought it would be 100%. So you are missing out on reaching populations to join your open source community. And then those people are missing out on the benefits. You're getting technical skills, and in a weird situation where you're actually publishing your skills and your proof of code in production where others can see. That is invaluable when you're looking for jobs in 2023. People are losing out on the networking opportunities that lead to jobs. They're getting to travel events, and there's also soft core skills. I prefer project management skills, community management skills that are really valuable. We need to get more people involved. To be clear, I am not a member of an open source community. I'm a journalist. This is the result, and this sociotechnical framework or idea that I'm offering you is a result of hundreds of interviews, and specifically talking to people minoritized in tech, because they're the ones that can tell what they most need. And also, I'm a working mom living in London. It's fucking expensive here. I can't afford to do free work. And I question if you should be doing free work either, which I know goes against the whole idea of open source. But if you are a company that is relying on an open source project that has only a single maintainer, that is a risk you are creating for yourself. You should be paying people to contribute. You should be paying people to mentor. You should be contributing to the project yourself. So why is open source so far behind? We already said it's voluntary work. Women and people of color are much more likely to be already doing all the unpaid care work, or the vast majority of it, or there's big tech companies that are sponsoring projects, but they have their own their own diversity problems. And the other thing that's very intrinsic to open source that, yeah, we're in England right now, but the English language is a huge barrier to entry in getting people involved. If you don't know Charlene Hunter, you should. You should be advertising on Coding Black Females. You should be aware of her amazing organization that is looking to get Black women in tech in the UK, in tech or back in tech. And as she said, I shouldn't have spent 8 years of my life not meeting another Black woman who does coding and has the same skills as me. 1% of the tech industry is Black women. That is a deep problem. Dr. Singh, or Vandana, does a lot of research on the binary in open source. And she does a lot of interviews with women in open source. And that feeling of isolation, that you're the only one in the room, isn't just that you're the only person in the room. It's that you're then representative for your entire demographic. That sucks. Or someone she interviewed was like, well, I can't actually answer you anonymously for anything because I am the only woman in this country working on this project. That sucks. But if you're not sure, who thinks they work or are part of an open source project? I really figured, again, that would be everyone, would be a part of it at least. You are not open source if you allow discrimination. By definition, the open source definition says if you are discriminatory, you are not open source. So the rest of the talk is about how to attract, onboard, retain, and create pathways to leadership in your open source community. So basically, how do you take someone who's used your software, get them to contribute, then regularly, and then give them a pathway to become a leader? So the easiest way to recruit people is to ask your current base. You are statistically proven 4 times more likely to get people to volunteer for your project if you ask them. It may seem obvious, but a lot of projects are not asking people. Speak at events, documentation, README, and all the languages, codes of conduct. This is the most important thing. Every single person that Vandana has interviewed, every single woman, checks the code of conduct of the project before considering contributing. Every single person. And thankfully, GitHub has put it more prevalently on the website. Not that all projects are in GitHub, but most are. And that means more people are going to check it. And not just, do you need a code of conduct? You need enforcement of the code of conduct. If you don't have a good one, or one at all, I highly recommend the open source project of the Contributor Covenant. This is a great starting point. I do not believe you should just stop here. You should be editing your code of conduct to speak and call out and tell people that you are targeting in the community who are welcome there. And then, most importantly, you need to have enforcement clear. You need to update who is the person to contact if this happens, what will happen if this happens, because shit happens. Onboarding. I love this by Sonia. You want your community to be welcoming, gentle, compassionate, curious. I love this idea that you should reward or at least acknowledge people that ask questions, celebrate learning, not just the answers, but the questions too. This is a huge problem. I've heard you guys at this conference, I'm just saying. I hear it everywhere. It took me years to break the habit. We're not all guys in tech. There's a lot of exclusive language, like saying something is easy or simple is naturally exclusive language, of course. If you are not sure if you should say something or not, please bookmark the self-defined app. This is a wonderful resource that explains to you what you should or should not be saying and why, and it explains the history of, and it's constantly evolving. And this is one of those situations where there are technical sources to get involved in this. So there's the inclusive bot, ally bot, and the DI bot. All of them are in English, some of them are paid for, so both problems, but ways that you can give notifications to people and remind in your Slack community. I actually have seen this in use of the CNCF Slack before. I haven't seen it since, where they're like, do you really want to use that? You know, they explain the reason why, and they try to push. That's a really good first line of code of conduct or defense. The Drupal community health nudges are also a really useful project where they've released all this information. So you can technically automate welcoming first contributions. I do not recommend this. This is your first new leadership role in your community. You need someone whose role is to welcome people. This is too important to automate, I would say, and this is a great way to bring people on in a really important way. Self-service, we know matters, documentation, getting started guides. In open source, you don't just have to explain the what, you have to explain the how and the why. I think video is the best way, either in a meeting or make a video where you explain to people why you're making an update. Then, of course, have dictation and notes so you can translate. These are really important. You want to empower people with as much as they need to get started and then feel safe to ask questions. One of the most tedious things a maintainer has to do is label issues. This is a really cool project. It can, based on GitHub, it can train to understand what would be the level of expertise needed for an issue, mark those issues, label those issues, and then, based on other people's contributions in public GitHub, use AI at a 90% accuracy to recommend who should do what. This is really important because just because someone's new to your project does not mean they're new to tech. And you are wasting their time and probably not retaining them if you're giving them beginner by default. But if you have the beginner, then you have a great recruitment tool, Good First Issue, which is a great site that you can list your first issues on. So next, this is kind of the crux of the talk. How do you retain people? First experiences are the most important thing. Again, statistics tend to be on the binary, but are likely true. For women, if they join, if they have a poor first experience, they leave. Open source communities use people in tech. 2/3 of people in tech are burnt out. That's something you have to fight against and make it something they want to join. Harassment, 50% of people in a GitHub survey had witnessed harassment in communities. So we don't know what's happening in DM if that's 50% witnessed. The larger open source tech events have a history of sexual assault, and we need to deal with that. And these are published. They publish this stuff. We need to make safe spaces for people in open source. And then, of course, if a project doesn't have a lot of members, it's not going to attract a lot of members. So by not creating a sense of belonging, you are actually making it worse. So open source is the OG virtual community, the OG distributed community. They've been doing it forever, so it warrants studying. So the Linux kernel community was studied by Bianca on 5 different dimensions. Compensation, I don't love this one. I think you should get paid, but yes, we know that your intrinsic motivation is higher when you are not paid for something, so there's that. Distance to influence the project matters. English language confidence, gender, and time on project. Those with a higher level of English confidence felt a greater sense of virtual community. Those that are not men felt a sense of virtual community across that community. Someone said, I didn't fit in. I could never make enough social capital to make networking effective, which, let's be honest, that's a lot of the reason people are involved in open source projects. These lead to jobs. And then someone else reported a constant sense of otherness that never went away. If you've not read this one, yes, I know it's 6 years old. Please, someone repeat this study. I have no reason to think it's changed. Basically, to take a very extensive study and put it in a nutshell over millions of pull requests, when gender is known, women's pull requests are less likely to be approved. But guess what? Their code is statistically better. There is less likely to be comments. There is less likely to be refactoring. So there is this idea that I know a lot of women and non-binary people that mask their gender in their code base so they can participate in open source and they're more likely to get approved. But then they're not getting the benefit of that networking. They're not getting the benefit of that. But there is a tool for that. So I would recommend, as a maintainer, Sal Kimmich has taught me that there's something called the halo effect, which if you have someone that contributes to your project often, you're like, I'm sure they're good. I'll just approve it. They're going to be the most likely targeted for a hacker. So your first code review should probably be masked so you don't have that halo effect and you have a higher sense of security and you're reading it blankly. This also leads to hopefully calling you on your shit and your bias and you approving the best code, which could be from the minority in the group. But then I would suggest, I've learned from Demetrius, one of the heads at GitHub, the whole point of GitHub DEI is that you want people to feel safe to bring their whole selves and your project benefits. We know that more diverse teams are more innovative. So beyond the first level of masking, probably you want to unmask that. Belongings must have, highlight those that are underrepresented, make work visible, acknowledge non-technical contributions, especially translation, enforce codes of conduct, and answer questions and amplify them, get ongoing feedback at all times. Finally, I think every project is leaning on an XKCD meme, and that's a problem. That's a problem. So I found this very poignant. Every open source project is looking for more maintainers, but someone asked them, what's the path to become a maintainer? They don't have an answer. How many of y'all actually have a path for someone to become a maintainer in your community? Oh, that's awkward. So basically, you start becoming a member, and then you go up. So the pathway that Mozilla has come up with is that you hear about the project, maybe you start using it, then you start participating in the project over a long period of time. I think this is the most important one, networked participation. How are you inviting and recruiting new members to the project? And then, of course, how do they become a leader? Someone that's good at tech may not be good as a leader. I don't know if we've heard this before. These are different qualities. They can be the same quality. That quality of someone that can bring people on and inspire them is really valuable. Linux Foundation has talked about how you want someone that can influence people, foster a community of transparency. All of these are super important. Formalized mentorship, one-to-one, one-to-many, hackathons. There's the Google Summer of Code, Outreachy, and She Code Africa. In 2021, She Code Africa had 180 women across the continent that were approved to become mentees in their project. Only three open source projects were willing to give up their time to mentor them, so very fewer could actually do the mentoring. That's a problem. Give back. Set clear expectations so people know what they're getting into. Your governance project, this is all again shared online everywhere. These are wonderful resources to help you govern more equitably in your project, and these are all great resources for it. And then another thing is that maintainers kind of feel a sense of isolation, which is a problem. So the open source community health call is something for maintainers to talk to other maintainers, and it's also good because perpetrators or harassers from other groups that got kicked out tend to go to another group, so you can kind of name and shame people, and you know that. And then just something Dr. Singh said, building a successful and healthy community takes a long time. But this is something you have to constantly work towards, because again, if tech is in our bodies, it's in our phones, it's in our hospitals, our cars, our pancreas, that is the most personal thing. And if open source is between 70 and 95% of tech stacks, that is the backbone of the future. But if we don't involve more people in building it, that future is screwed. Thank you.